Well, good evening, everyone. I hereby call this meeting, oh, sorry, it's a different night for that, sorry. Welcome to the first of 5 community conversations to discuss our upcoming Pardeeville Schools referendums, which you will see on the April 1st spring election. My name is Benjamin Henninger. I am the superintendent of the Pardeeville Area School District, and I'm here tonight to thank you for being a part of the process. And this has been a lengthy process and one that I jumped into kind of in the middle of. And I am just really pleased to see the level of dedication that this community has put into public education. And so for that, I thank you even before we go into the slideshow. What we have here in Pardeeville is nothing short of amazing. And so I do just want to thank anyone who's been involved in making this an amazing place already. So, on April 1st, we do have an election, and you'll see 2 questions on there regarding our referendums. But before we get there, once again, I'm Benjamin Henninger, superintendent. And then if you could just stand and wave or do something to acknowledge your presence in the community here tonight. Mr. David Bell, high school principal. Ms. Amber Denor, middle school principal. Mr. Andy Cohn, elementary principal. And Mr. Jim Hausner, I saw him in the back there, someone with a red hat. There he is, yep. So that is our leadership team, our administration here in Pardeeville Area School District, and they've been instrumental to helping me get up to speed with the facility study that was conducted long before my arrival. So I want to thank the administrative team first and foremost for their patience as I get up to speed on where we are at with this project. And then, of course, none of this would be possible without the dedication from our Board of Education. I don't know if you want to stand or wave, but I know a lot of them are here tonight. Otherwise, what do you think, Becky? Should I just read the names? Or okay, sure. So our President, Becky Lovezow, is here. I think I saw Justin Nickel, Vice President. Carla Walker, Treasurer. Sorry, I'll call it titles. Justin Nickel, Vice President. Carla Walker, Treasurer. Chad Bellis, Clerk. Brett Ochterberg, Board Member. Paul Hees, board member, and Autumn Pease, board member. So there is our Board of Education, and we've been working hand in hand throughout the last several months on refining the goals of this project. And so tonight is a culmination of the efforts of the admin team, the school board, and our community. And of course, we have our project partners with us tonight as well, and they will be providing more detailed information about certain aspects of this project because like any referendum, there are many parts that have to come together in just the right order. And so we wouldn't be here tonight without their efforts as well. So if you could please stand up or just wave when I read your name. Aaron Zutz, Director of Project Management from Findorf. And Nathan Sheevy, Education Market Sector Leader from Growth Design Group. And Carol Worth, President of Wisconsin Public Finance. And so they have worked really, really closely with our entire team since the beginning of this process. So, just some background on the district. As you can see, we are comprised within 2 counties across 88 square miles and 8 municipalities. So, an expansive district that serves a lot of people, serves a large geographic area. And we are configured in 2 buildings. We have the elementary school that is over across the street, and then we have the middle school and high school here on one campus. And so total square footage of our facilities is 221,144 square feet. And as you can see, the elementary school is just passing 100 years old. That building has origins of almost over a century ago. With additions in 1959 and 1993. And then the middle school, which is connected to this building, has origins in 1993 with an addition in 2004. And one of the things that we're going to talk about in more detail later is the Balliet building, which has 3 5th grade classrooms. And it was built circa 1960s. And then the district bought it in the mid-1980s and has remained pretty much unchanged to this day. And it's still is a detached part of our building and grounds. So, and then of course Pardeeville High School, grades 9 through 12, originated in 1965 with additions in 1966, 1974, and most recently 2018. So, as you can see, it's always important to have a school when you have students enrolled in it, and our enrollment has been steadily increasing over the last several years. And the population survey that you see referenced here is in partnership with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I've worked with them before in a previous district, and their work is invaluable because sometimes people ask the question, well, who are we building this project for? And as you can see, we do have positive enrollment trends in the Pardeeville Area School District. And you don't see it on this chart too, but people also in Wisconsin are able to open enroll their children in or out of a district. And we are net positive, and we have the highest open enrollment in since 2017. So I won't deviate too much from our slide presentation tonight, but it's worth noting that the positive enrollment trends are consistent in our district, which supports the need for our expansion and funding. So here's our process. As I said, I came in kind of in the middle of it, maybe even towards the end of the middle of it, on the second half. This started back in 2022 when the district, in coordination with several groups, some of which are here tonight, looked at the needs of our facilities and operations and really did a detailed job. I've got the binder in my office, it's about this thick. That was the result of that study. And so they conducted a thorough review of the district's needs and provided us some feedback when it came to prioritizing some of those things that we just could not do at that moment in time, but would have to later. And that includes a lot of things that people don't think about, things like maintenance, upgrades, and including safety, and especially, most importantly, safety. Making sure that we're addressing those needs as we move forward with any building project or any building design. And then developing solutions. That's kind of where the community conversations last year came in, where we were soliciting feedback from the community about what some of those needs might be. And then I jumped in last summer, and it was right before we ended up working with school perceptions. And some of those suspicions that we thought were important for our district were confirmed through that study. And I want to thank everyone once again for participating in that study. If you filled it out, returned it, did the QR code thing, because that was really instrumental in guiding some of the solutions that you are going to be seeing on the screen tonight. And so we would not be acting in the way that we are without the input of the community. And it's very important to acknowledge that as we move forward as a district. And then, of course, back in January, the board adopted 2 resolutions that will appear on the spring ballot, and we will get into that very shortly. So that's where we were a couple of years ago, and here's where we are now, the tip of the iceberg. I'd like to introduce Nathan to discuss the next part of our project.
Thanks, Ben. So these next couple slides that you see on the screen are a little bit of history, but a reminder of where we were in the community survey. So that survey, as Ben mentioned, was completed last fall, but these conversations to develop these potential solutions have been going on for about a year, right? Just ahead of our community conversations in February, starting in February. So what you see on the screen, I don't want to spend too much time talking about this solution because it is a dated one. And we've reduced scope and refined scope based on additional conversations with district staff, additional conversation with board members, the critical information that we received through the community survey, and additional conversations with community members as well. So a bit of orientation, because the colors and the style of graphic that you see on the screen here will be consistent with when we're looking at the current solutions that the board voted on and decided to move forward with the referendum question. So the blue colors on the right side of the elementary building here, so that's the south side of the existing building, would be an addition, so expanding the footprint of the existing building and showing 2 classrooms with support spaces here at the community survey. Anything in yellow would be a renovation to the existing building, so within the existing exterior walls, but reshaping space within the existing building. And at survey time, we were considering renovation associated with 4K classrooms, support spaces for students, OT, PT, which is occupational therapy and physical therapy classroom, as well as some intervention spaces, that's the INT, some general building support spaces with storage, a changing room for the gymnasium within the existing locker rooms, an update and improvement to the secure entry sequence, some updates to some staff spaces, and an improvement for the connection between the cafeteria and the kitchen. Up on the second floor, there was also at survey time some renovations that we were considering there, taking three existing classrooms, but creating 2 larger classrooms in the existing space, as well as a support space for special education. A reminder here, both at the elementary school, so the plans that we just saw, and here at the middle school, high school, what you're seeing on the screen represents the full consideration of projects that were on the community survey. Within the community survey, it was separated into base projects and then additional projects. But these graphics on the screen would be the totality of all of those, both at the elementary building and then here at the middle school, high school. So again, colors consistent. Anything that's shown in blue would be an addition or an expansion of the footprint of the existing building. So related to middle school classrooms, that would replace the Balliet building. Again, proposing here that the Balliet building would be demolished. Middle school gym expansion, a relocation of the middle school office, bringing it down to the south side of the existing building, closer to our main parking area, and more related to the pickup drop-off sequence as well. And then expansion related to a shared cafeteria space, kitchen, and some tech ed expansion. The yellow throughout the middle school and high school, again, renovations to the existing building, so not an expansion of the footprint, but considering those related to tech ed, again, it's cafeteria space, relocation of the fitness center, relocation of agriculture classroom, the foods classroom, an expansion and relocation of some student services space, as well as some science and core classroom spaces. All of this that you see on the screen here, especially the internal renovation, was largely related to a existing cafeteria challenge, specifically at the high school, but I think even more pronounced for middle school students. So looking to define a space as much as possible within the existing building, but here showing it as some renovation as well for middle school and high school students for lunch. And that, Ben, I think goes back to you.
So out of the survey came some guidance from the community on what we were willing to support in terms of our operations. And that's separate of capital. So there are 2 types of referenda that the community can provide support for financially. One is operational and the other one is capital. So that'd be building projects. So the first question that we are focusing on is basically the result of systemic underfunding by the state. And we're just having a very difficult time providing the resources in our district that we need to provide a really high quality education for all students. The needs of students are going up. That includes students who are enrolled in special education. That includes students who need interventions to fill in learning gaps, and providing our staff members the resources to meet all of their needs is just quite frankly going up. And so the operational question will support things to address programs and services to meet those needs, attract and retain staff, and complete basic maintenance projects. And the reason I focus on the word basic is because there are certain projects that you will see later in the slideshow that encompass an amount that would be well beyond what we could typically budget for. Those are big ticket items, roofs, things that are supposed to last 25, 30 years and have, and just at some point need to be replaced or have a plan to be replaced. So these are other things that would be more in line with traditional maintenance things. I don't want to say like a $20,000 fan shaft, Mr. Hausner, but things that are definitely going to take a toll on our budget unless we have an opportunity to augment our funding in some way, and that's what this operational question will do. So the district's tax mill rate used to calculate our our sheriff's local property taxes has dropped 35% since 2017, and we're not alone. The district that I came to you from lost $400,000 in revenue in 3 years, and it was a much smaller district than this one. And so we're certainly not unique in that regard, and it's happening in districts all over the state, depending on what the calculation is on the revenue limits. And so that will allow us the authority to fill that gap with this funding. And if approved, the operational referendum would increase the mill rate by projected 54 cents, representing $54 for every 100,000 of property value. And this is based on 2023 equalized property values. And I want to be very clear on that. Property values do change, as we are all aware. And so a lot of these dollar amounts are subject to change based on those assessed values and those fair market values, which are two different things. But I won't get into that tonight.
I think a quick clarification, because I think there's some fonts that's disconnected here. So 35 should read 39%, and then the 54 cents, I think should read 94 cents, if I'm correct.
Okay. I don't know if that got lost in translation, but yeah, that does look low. So thanks for the reminder. What you have on your flyers is accurate information. So if something got lost in translation on the slideshow, we apologize for that, and we'll move on. So the tax impact, this is the more accurate one, yes. So the operational referendum tax increase would be $94 per 100,000, or just under $1 on the mill rate, and the capital referendum tax increase would be $190 under the base plan. So we wanted to find an amount that the community support based on the survey, and that ended up being right in the middle of the $22 million base plan and the $28 million project. And so, do we have needs that exceed the amount that we are asking the community for? Yes. And when I first came in last summer, we were talking about somewhere near the area of $40 million in needs. And those needs still exist, and I'll say that publicly, but the survey data that we received back from the community made it clear that that was not an amount that they would be willing to support. And so the board and the admin team have prioritized projects to meet the most pressing needs through our capital referendum question. So the survey, which was sent out to our community, we had approximately a 15% response rate, which is actually very high. In a previous district, it was around the same rate, and it was highly predictive in the outcome of the referendum, which did pass. It was actually within 1 percentage point of what the survey data had told us. And so once again, there is a margin of error in the data that we received from school perceptions. However, they are remarkably predictive, and we have really solid data from the community when we start looking at the probabilities of these questions being successful. So for the operational referendum for $800,000 over 3 years, the community, based on weighted support, which includes 3 different demographics: staff, parents, and non-parents and non-staff. So that's part of their equation for coming up with more reliable numbers on what percentage would be successful. Is somewhere in the neighborhood of 58.4% of the respondents would support the operational referendum if the election would have been held at that time. And so, once again, there is some wiggle room based on that margin of error, but that's a very comforting thought to know once again that this community did such an incredible job of providing the support to run a great school. And so the operational needs are there, and they will certainly be put to good use to attract, retain staff, definitely augment our budget when it comes to curriculum and those basic maintenance projects that I spoke of earlier. The facilities referendum question, as I alluded to, was a little bit more complicated. With the $40 million and possibly upwards in needs, or I'm just going to call them really good ideas, it was becoming more likely that that type of a situation would not be successful based on the data that we were receiving from the survey. And so when the board sat down and worked towards a solution with our project partners on the capital referendum question, we looked at the data very carefully, and in similar fashion to the operational question, we were able to dial in and get some meaningful feedback on different amounts. And as it's probably not a surprise to anyone, as the amounts go up, the percentage that it will be successful typically goes down. And this was no exception. So we gauged the community support at $28 million as having about a 36.6% chance of passage. $22 million, about a 50.1% chance of passage, and a smaller amount, a 67.5% chance of being successful. And once again, there is a plus or minus 4.28 statistical margin of error, which can go above or below that. But once again, very predictive on the outcome of any of these questions should the referendum have been held at that time. So our solution, and the question you will see on your ballot on April 1st or earlier if you choose to absentee vote, and I'll let Carol explain that one.
Present here, so. Okay, good evening. All right, so April 1st, you're going to see two questions on the ballot. This is going to be called question 1. It's for operations. It's not user-friendly language, so we're going to spend a little time going through it. So it talks about, it's written in a question format so you can answer yes or no. And it starts with, shall the Pardeeville School District, the counties, Wisconsin, be authorized? And the key word here is authorized. Authorized means you're giving permission to the school district. And it's to exceed the revenue limit. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about what the revenue limit is, but it is a law. And so therefore, it cites the specific law, which is in the Wisconsin statutes in section 12151, in case you want to read about it. And then it says to exceed that revenue limit by $800,000 per year for 3 years. And it starts with the 25-26 school year budget, which will start as of July 1st, 25. And it ends with the 27-28 school year budget. And then it says for non-recurring purposes. Non-recurring means that it stops. It expires. Non-recurring will only allow the district to levy a tax for $800,000 for each of those 3 years, and then it stops. Okay, that's what non-recurring means. And then it says, give me an example of what these purposes are, right? And so the purpose of this question is to provide for operating costs, and they are to sustain the operating expenses so that you can maintain the current level of operations, okay? In this case, this question isn't going to build something new. This question is to maintain what the district has, okay? So that's the purpose of question 1. Now, a little more explanation about that. This, to exceed the revenue limit, means that the district would be given permission to levy a tax for that $800,000. There's no borrowing going on with this question. So again, you would levy the tax, those 3 budget years, it expires. That's the meaning of non-recurring. Voter permission would be required to continue this tax levy, okay? The $800,000 would be added to the district's overall operating levy. Now, you get a tax bill every year. In that tax bill is school district taxes, okay? That number that's in there is made up of 2 components. Part of it is, and this is taking your December of 24 tax bill as an example. So that included $4,651,236 for operations, and should be $902,753 for debt payments. So the operating levy for the December of 25 tax bills, that information will become known to us in October, okay? So because the district receives information from the state at that time. So What we want to do is present the impact of this referendum in a way that you can take your tax bill from December of '24, pull up the numbers that we're going to talk about later in the presentation, and look at what your taxes were and add what part of this $800,000 would be on your next tax bill. So this is going to be an increase over the amount in your December 24 tax bill. Okay? So the district, as I mentioned, has payments for debt in this tax bill, and that's primarily for this facility that went to referendum, and that is going to continue until the year 2038. At that time, that goes away, and when that goes away, that falls off of the tax bill. The district cannot continue to tax beyond 2038 when the last payment will be made. Okay, again, a little more about this revenue limit. Okay, what is it? Well, we talked about it. It's already it's a state law. It applies to all Wisconsin school districts. It was implemented back in 1993. No one thought that 32 years later we'd be still talking about that law, but we are. That particular law limits the amount of revenue that school districts receive, and it is subject to legislative changes every 2 years with the state's budget process. That's what makes it so difficult for school districts to project, because as you know, different people are making those decisions every 2 years, different things come out of negotiations every 2 years, and it directly impacts the school district's revenue. The school district's revenue is primarily from state aid and property taxes. The thing about those two is that if you have more aid, you're going to have less taxes. And if you get less aid, it results in more taxes. Okay, so if you have more aid, that doesn't mean you have more revenue. The revenue limit determines how much revenue that the school district will receive. Okay, so then the way the calculation is made is by using a worksheet that comes from the Department of Public Instruction. It comes to the district every year, and it comes pretty much pre-populated. There's only a few things that the district enters on that sheet. One of the main things is this enrollment count that the district takes in September. When that enrollment count is put in that formula, it runs through the calculation. Again, it's just an Excel spreadsheet, and it comes out to what I call line 11. That says this is how much revenue you get. Line 12 is the state telling you how much aid you're going to get. They're going to share in your expenses by giving you that aid. And then that gets subtracted from line 11, and then we get to line 13. Of course, line 13 becomes the property tax number. Okay, so that's why more aid just is property tax relief, and it doesn't produce more revenue. So just wanted to explain that, because that will also could have an impact on your taxes from year to year. If you get less aid and your property taxes go up, that doesn't mean the district received more revenue. Okay, so we'll talk about this more later on in the presentation under the financial section.
Yeah, great, thanks. So as mentioned briefly earlier, when we talk about operations, that is a very wide encompassing concept when it comes to supporting the instruction of our students. So we talk about academic, co-curricular, and athletic programs, smaller class sizes. There's a strong correlation between smaller class sizes and student achievement, and so that's something to consider. It's easier for students to receive direct instruction in a more personalized setting, and that obviously requires more staff and higher costs. A variety of class offerings at the high school as well. There's some very basic things that we can provide under state law, but then there are other things like AP courses and enrichment that are supported by additional funding. advanced placement and dual credit courses at the high school, which gives all of our students a leg up, those who participate, a leg up on life beyond our school, and preparing them to be well-rounded citizens of tomorrow. And so the support that we get through our operating referendum would directly augment those programs. Student and staff access to current technology. We do have a one-to-one Chromebook initiative, and we do have a replacement cycle. And so I work hand in hand with our administrative team to make sure that we're budgeting appropriately for that. The costs, just like with everything else, have gone up consistently. There's a big one, teacher at heart right here, retain and recruit high-quality staff. And that includes salaries and benefits, which are a substantial part of our budget. Utilities, insurances, transportation costs. The inflationary impact on the operating budget has been higher than usual in the last few years. It just has been. And so we're grappling with that without having to make cuts in other areas. Preserve the district's solid financial position, and then of course reduce reliance upon and costs of short-term borrowing, which becomes required for cash flow purposes.
Okay, now we're going to walk through, we've done this a few times before, and this is a history of operational referendums just going back to 2007. It might have been a couple more before that, but this is all we could fit on this page. So just a good explanation of how this works, okay? We heard the words recurring. We heard there's different dollar amounts. So let's just walk through the slide a moment, okay? Starting with the year 2007. Okay, the very first one on here, there was 3 years, 800, 800, and 875, okay? So that means that they went to referendum, just like we are now, for 3 years, for those dollar amounts, and then it expired. So then it required the district to go back to referendum, and that happened in 2010. So again, walking across the page, you'll see that the next number in 1011 was 875 and 875. So that was a 2-year non-recurring referendum. That expired. 2012 went to referendum for 925,000 for 2 years. And that expired. Back to referendum in 2014. That was a 4-year, as you can see, starting in 905, down to 885, down to 850 for 2 years. And then that expired. Now we go to the bottom part. In 2017, okay, we had to, again, go back to referendum for operations. So that was what was called a combination question. It actually had recurring for 4 years, as you can see, 850, all 4 years. And there was a component for this auditorium, for the operations of the auditorium, of $130,000. And that was called recurring. So what's happening is that $130,000 was put into this revenue limit calculation and stays there. It's not 130,000 goes in every single year. It's not a cumulative effect. It goes in one time and stays there. When it stays there, it's called recurring. So that is still in your tax bill, okay? But the part above it was for 850, that expired after 4 years. So we had to go back to referendum in 2022. Now, back at that time, we went back to the 850,000 number and made that because we had studied all of this prior information and determined that there is never going to be a time that we're not going to need that 850,000. So therefore, that 850,000 started in the year 22, 23. And became recurring, ongoing. So that was put into the revenue limit at that time, and it stays there. So it's still in tax bills today. It's still part of the revenue limit today, okay? So the other part of that question from 2022 was to have 4 years with different dollar amounts. You'll see 2 at $525 and 2 at $350, and that's non-recurring. So that means that it will expire in the year 25-26. Now, we're currently in the 24-25 year. So if we're going to referendum now in 2025, and it's going to start in the year 25-26. So that's where the 800,000 starts, and it's going to go for 3 years. So when we start it in 25-26, we are going to have 1 year from the 2022 referendum that is still going to be in effect. We are going to have the 850 that's recurring still in effect. And we are going to have the 130 for the auditorium still in effect. Okay? But once we go to the next year, 26-27, we're going to lose the 350,000 from the 2022 referendum because that one was non-recurring and stopped at that point. So we are going to go down in that year. Okay? Okay. Now, this is a history of facilities referendums, right? Like what we're going to talk about with question 2. Okay, totally different. This is not operational. And again, starting in 2017, that was for this facility that we're in. That passed, $11,935,000. We had 3 other ones in 14, 12, and 2004. And those dollar amounts that passed for, again, the purposes are summarized because that's what was the description in the referendum question. And then, of course, prior to that, 03, 02, were some referendums that did not pass. Now, the 2017 referendum is the only one that has debt still outstanding and in your tax bills. The 14, 12, 04 have all been paid off. So the 2017 facilities referendum has debt payments every year, about $902,000. That will continue through 2038, and then it will fall off the tax levy. Okay.
So the facilities referendum that we are considering for the spring has some very specific needs that have been outlined in that facility study. A lot of the pictures that you see, they're not doctored, they are actual pictures of things that have really exceeded their useful life. That's how I say it charitably. Some of these things have been in our facilities since the 60s and 70s and have remained virtually unchanged since then. You can see a few examples in the lower left-hand corner. Some of those stoves have burners that do not function and have not for quite some time. Roofs, as I mentioned earlier, are becoming in need of replacing, especially in the middle school. You can see in the upper right-hand corner the loading dock with the leaking ceiling. And then, of course, I don't want to say the bane of our existence because I just got here and you've been dealing with it longer than I have. It's the Balliet building, the infamous Balliet building that was not designed with educational adequacy in mind on the lower right-hand side, which would be demolished as part of the project and replaced with a building addition. I won't talk about the other ceiling leak that Jim and I have been working on this week, but just please know that that's just a fact of our situation right now with roofs that are getting to be exceeding their useful life.
All right, now, question 2 on the ballot. Okay, again, we're going to walk through the language. Again, this is drafted by lawyers. Okay, and when the lawyers draft it, they're doing it according to statutes that specify how referendum questions must be worded. So sometimes people will ask, why did you say this? Why didn't you include this? It's because lawyers have determined what the question, how it needs to read in order to be compliant. So again, written in a question format for you to vote yes or no. It's starting the same way. Shall the Pardeeville School District, the 2 counties, again, that word authorized, be authorized. Now this is a little different. This one says to issue pursuant to Chapter 67 of the Wisconsin statutes, totally different than the revenue limit statute, to issue general obligation bonds, okay? General obligation bonds, that's the name for the type of borrowing that school districts do, okay? That would be the name of, like, if you were going to take out a loan, okay? When school districts borrow money, they sell bonds in the municipal bond market. The word general obligation means that it's paid back from all of the taxes levied on the property located within the school district boundaries. So general obligation bonds, okay, in an amount not to exceed $23,500,000. That's a restriction, okay? So that's one restriction. And then it says for the public purpose of, this is the second restriction, paying the cost of a school building and facility improvement project consisting of. Now, from this point forward, the attorneys that wrote the language, right, reviewed all of the project that is being considered in this referendum. They reviewed it, and they came up with this language to make sure that when we borrow the money, it can only be used for the purposes mentioned in this resolution. And this resolution started back in January when the school board adopted this as a resolution, and then it became your ballot language. So you can see that it has district-wide capital maintenance, building infrastructure and site improvements, renovations and construction of an addition at the middle high school, demolition of Balliet building, renovations, construction of an addition, and safety and security improvements at the elementary school, acquisition of furnishing, fixtures, and equipment, okay? So sometimes people say, well, you know, why do we have 2 questions, right? Why don't we just do this with 1 question? Well, it's because, again, it's the state law that drives that. This question is about borrowing money. If the district borrows the money, and we just heard about the operating needs of the district, this money cannot be used for district operations. So that's why this is a restriction in here as to what this borrowed money can be used for. So if you need money for operations, you are required to have that separate operational question, okay? Okay, so again, a little more explanation on this question. When you're voting on this question, you're not voting on locking in the borrowing. You're voting on giving the school board permission to, in the future, do a borrowing for the project. So we start off with the restrictions of, number 1, not to exceed $23,500. The fact that the funds can only be used for the project that's in the question, cannot be used for operations, okay? The financing assumptions that we prepared for coming up with a tax impact for everyone was to assume that this would happen, the borrowing would not happen all at one time, but rather in 2 phases. The question doesn't limit you to how many phases you can borrow the money. It limits you to what the dollar amount is collectively that you borrow. So it can never exceed that $23,500. So right now we're assuming that it would be borrowed in 2 phases. And that would give you a 21-year repayment. State law limits a borrowing that a school district can do to 20 years. So if you do it over 2 phases, you get a grand total of 21 years, okay? So that's how we get to that number. We're using an estimated interest rate of 4.5%, which in today's market is still a conservative rate. When you take and you amortize that $23.5 million at that 4.5%, you get an annual principal and interest combined number of $1,710,000. Okay? Remember earlier we talked about the district still has existing debt outstanding for this facility of about $903 every single year. Well, this would be $1,710,000 every single year for that 21 years. So after the referendum, if the referendum would pass, there is a lot of actions to be taken after that. And then some of those actions will determine when the district actually goes out and borrows the money. And then the school board has to approve a resolution that locks in those final principal and interest payment dates. So if, right now, as I mentioned, the 4.5% is conservative. If we come in with a lower interest rate, which we did when we did the 2017 referendum, then we can come back to you with good news and say, okay, well, we gave you conservative numbers and the actual result is going to be, a little more positive. That's okay. We'd rather do that, and that's the reason why we want to be conservative on our estimates. Okay, so now beyond that, there are other events that are going to happen and determine the need for borrowing.
Thanks, Carol. So, Carol, as you mentioned, right, that there are assumptions both in the assumptions and estimates for the financing calculations. There are assumptions and estimates from the estimating, so construction cost side as well. So there's a series of future milestones related to design, getting into details of construction documents outside or above and beyond the concept drawings where we are right now. And then through bidding and construction as well, which spelled out in words here, and then also identified here through a graphic. So this is estimated, this is preliminary, but after some detailed conversation between the growth and the Findorf teams, I think we're confident in this timeline. It likely will be adjusted, but not in any dramatic or significant way. So you see on the left side here, we have 4 areas of projects, largely separated by building, but then the district-wide capital maintenance as well. Colors on the screen, the lightest blue color would be design phase. So the detailed design work, both architectural, structural, civil, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the time that it would take to get to a construction document level for all of those different disciplines. That's why you see following a successful referendum, if the referendum is successful this spring, we would kickstart that detailed design process. The orange represents a bidding phase, so that's practically right at the end of the 2025 calendar year. And then formal construction on additions or renovations would begin then in spring of 2026 and be completed by fall of 2026. The outlier, which you see on the very bottom, is the district-wide capital maintenance, which we'll talk about some of those projects as well. But you'll see key areas of summer heavy construction or heavy renovation, being very mindful that the capital maintenance projects impact existing spaces. So if it's a roofing project, HVAC for heating or for cooling, that those impact classrooms that need to be fully functioning during the school year. So that's why there's those key phases of heavy construction during the summer months. Hopefully, as much as we can accomplish or what's realistic to accomplish and kickstart right away in the summer of 2025, but most realistically, the summer of 2026, and potentially the summer of 2027 in terms of those capital maintenance projects. So talking a bit more about the facility solution, which again, we have text here on the screen, and then we'll have some images to support this as well. I won't read this whole slide, but I think a handful of key things to note out of the pillars that were identified through our community conversations. We've worked hard as a design team, and the district has worked hard alongside of us to maintain key projects that impact each of those pillars that were identified by the community. So capital maintenance related to roofing and HVAC systems, safety and security at each of the existing buildings, Ben, you talked about the challenges with the Balliet building related to safety and security, as well as educational adequacy, which we'll talk about as well. So safety and security, a key part of the projects, potential projects that we're identifying. Kitchens, cafeterias, and food service spaces. So the photos of the existing high school kitchen, right, and some of the challenges that exist there, looking to address those. Career and technical education, specifically agriculture classroom at the high school, which we'll see once we get to the next slide. And then the Balliet building, middle school classrooms, and then the early learning classroom at the elementary school. So that educational adequacy component, looking to provide as similar of an educational space, a core classroom for students, regardless of what grade they're in and what building they're located in. So this image that you see here on the screen should look very familiar from the survey, which hopefully all of you took and which we saw on an earlier slide. But you will notice that there has been a reduction in scope, which was a key takeaway that the design team and the district worked towards, incorporating feedback from the community survey, and that's true here at the elementary building as well as the middle school and the high school. So you see still our blue color represents addition and the yellow color represents renovation, but less total scope here at the elementary building than was proposed in the community survey. So in the current project that everyone will vote on in April, what we're considering at the elementary building is a addition of a single classroom, so to expand the footprint of the existing building along with support spaces. Likely that would be a 5-year-old kindergarten classroom, but we would design it as such that it could function as an early learning classroom, so either for 4K, 4-year-old kindergarten, 5-year-old kindergarten, or even first grade, likely not 3rd or 4th grade, just because of their location within the building. But this location for the addition will be directly adjacent to the existing 5-year-old kindergarten classrooms. And then 2 key areas of renovation that we've maintained as they were described in the community survey, also here in this proposed project. Reconfiguration of the secure entry. So if you can think about when you walk into that existing vestibule, on the far right side you have access to a stairwell to the 2nd floor from the vestibule. This project would separate that stair completely from the secure entry sequence. So all visitors that would be approaching the elementary building would be directed to the main office to interact with a staff member before they be released elsewhere within the building. Also maintaining an improvement to the connection between the cafeteria and the kitchen, one of those key pillars that we talked about from the community surveys. Capital maintenance, all the capital maintenance that would be proposed or completed within the elementary building is not graphically represented here on this screen, so we're not showing areas where HVAC would be updated or where security cameras would be updated, but a key component, a major component dollar-wise, is roofing replacement. So the heavy red line inside of that, so the roof above the gymnasium, above the cafeteria, above the main office, as well as above the elementary classrooms in the southwest corner of the existing building. All of that roofing is proposed to be replaced as part of the project that we're exploring. Looking at the middle school and high school then, this crops the total building just slightly, so you can see where Ben is sitting, but maybe not where Aaron is sitting in the Performing Arts Center on the screen here. But again, blue representing additions and yellow representing renovations, our heavy red line representing roof replacement. So the key components that we have maintained from the community survey to this currently proposed project is an addition of middle school classrooms that would be replacing the Balliet building, so demolishing that building with its challenges and formally and fully connecting a addition for middle school classrooms to the rest of the middle school building. So no longer would students travel outside between certain classes, and they would have a hallway connecting the two. And the location for the addition also allows us to include some gym support spaces, so thinking about some changing rooms and some additional storage, be it community storage or athletic storage, that could support the middle school gym. And then 2 key areas of renovation, the agriculture classroom, which we talked about before, again, a key pillar that was identified for career and technical education, so improvements within that existing classroom space. improvements to the ventilation system, as well as improvements to the general classroom environment. And then kitchen, cafeteria, servery, and loading dock. Not all of those rectangles are identified explicitly here on the screen, but all planned appropriately within the larger Z shape that you're seeing that's labeled as kitchen and cafeteria. So relocating the existing kitchen and improving both equipment and the environment within that space. Same thing for the servery, and then dramatically expanding the footprint of the cafeteria, so the seating area, approximately doubling the size of the existing high school cafeteria to serve both high school students and middle school students. We had a lot of conversation with middle school principal and high school principal about how the operations of that combined lunch space, that combined cafeteria would work. And through those conversations, confident that we could identify lunch periods or identify zones within the larger cafeteria for that to function successfully for both middle school and high school students. Again, mentioned similar to the elementary building, not every element of capital maintenance is graphically represented here on the screen. The roofing replacement is, and it's in a large area of the existing building. So you see all of the classrooms that are on the west side of the building would have their roofs replaced. The roof above the gymnasium and the fitness center would be replaced. Same thing for the entirety of the middle school classrooms and the middle school gymnasium as well. All of that roofing would be replaced. And here I'll hand it back to Carol to talk through some of the last financial information that we have for the group this evening.
Okay, so I get the challenge of keeping everybody awake now. All right. State aid, we talked about this earlier when we were looking at the revenue limit question. Okay, and again, keep in mind, state aid is property tax relief. The purpose of this graphic, 10-year history, is to demonstrate that the amount of state aid that the school district receives is totally dependent upon the state budget bill that is adopted every 2 years. So you can see here back in 15-16 and 16-17, that would represent one state budget bill, right? So you can see the amount went up. The next year, the amount went down for that 2 state budget bills, right? Then we go over to 1920, 2021, okay? 1920 was almost kind of flat. 2021, we went up a little bit. Now look at 21, 22, and 22, 23, you know, significant jump. 23, 24, kind of flat. And 24, 25, which is where we're now, nice jump. Okay, what this means is that if the district didn't get this money, this would be on your property tax bill. Okay, so to give you just an idea of what that means to the district's budget, this 24-25 number, that $5,860,000, means that the state is sharing in about 52% of the district's operating and debt payments. Okay, so that's what it means to the district, but also that means you're seeing property tax relief. Now, all I want you to take away from on this slide is there's ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs, okay? So this can affect your property tax bill. It doesn't mean that the district's going to get more money when it goes up, because this doesn't control the revenue. That revenue limit that we talked about, that spreadsheet that calculates line 11, that determines how much revenue the school district receives. This is just line 12. That gets subtracted from line 11, and line 13 is property taxes. So your tax bill could go up, but yet line 11 could have gone down. But yet if this goes down, your property taxes are going up. Doesn't mean that the district got more money. It just means that the state pulled back from sharing in those costs. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that up in terms of what could affect your property tax bill in any year. Okay, tax levy. Same thing, as we just said. Line 11 on the revenue limit determines how much revenue. Line 12 is the state aid. The difference between the two gives you the tax levy. So look at the same relationship, right? We've seen up and down on the prior page. Well, when the state aid went up, the levy number came down. So it's the same relationship, up and down, okay? So that's what you're seeing here. Now, 24-25, $5,594,000. This is what was in your December of 24 tax bill. And that was made up of those two numbers, right? A little over $4 million for your operations and about $903,000 for the debt payment. So that's what made up that number there, okay? Again, that number is lower than the number before because the state aid in 24-25 was higher than the year before, okay? So again, that's the relationship. The district has no control over the state aid. That's all subject to the state budget. We are now this year in 25-26 in another new state budget cycle. So we have no information to bring you with any certainty to tell you what that tax levy number is going to be with or without the referendum because we don't have the information yet. We have to wait through till it goes through the state budget cycle. So what we're doing is showing you this information, giving you a little history, 10-year history, and focusing on what you have most current in your hands, which would be your tax bill from December of 24, and that's where we're going to continue to pick up on going forward. Now, property values. We're going to be working with what's called your equalized or fair market property value. That is determined by the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. That is not your assessed value. Okay? Assessed value is a totally different thing. That is determined by your local property assessor. That is not the valuation that we are talking about here. That's determined by Department of Revenue. They come up with those numbers based on growth that's occurring in your community, based on recent sales of property in your community, okay? Changes to classifications of property. All of those things are gathered by the Department of Revenue, and they come up with a number, and every person's tax bill has got information that reflects the Department of Revenue's numbers, okay? So you can see a 10-year history going back. $490,882,000 was the property value of all of the property within the school district's boundaries. Look at where we are here in 24-25. $940 million. Over 10 years, 92% increase in property value. What's that made up of? Two things. Some new growth and inflation, okay? But nonetheless, we're going to be talking about the words fair market value. Okay, now we're going to be talking about mill rate, tax rate, and we're going to be talking about it in terms of a per 1,000 number. So how do you get that number? Well, we've seen the property tax value over $940 million, and we've seen the tax levy, okay, about what, $5.9 million? We divide that 5.9 into the 940, and that gives us a rate, okay? So you can see back 10 years ago, that rate was $10.57. You can see where it's been going, right? Well, one of the reasons it's been going that way is because the property values have been going that way. Okay, so again, in your tax bill, the most current one, $5.95 per $1,000 of fair market value. That's the tax rate. The statewide average for this year was $705. Okay, so that's where you stand for this year as a comparison. Okay. All right. So for our tax impact, we have calculated the operating referendum as taking 800,000 and dividing it into the valuation, that $960 million number. And that gives you a tax rate of 85 cents. Now that would be in effect for 3 years, and then it expires because it's a non-recurring referendum. Question 2, the facilities one. Okay, the facilities question has, remember I told you we were going to amortize that $23.5 million. We're going to repay it over 21 years, and that payment is about $1,710,000. Well, we take that number and divide it into the property value for the whole school district, and we come out with $1.82 per thousand. Okay, so that's how, and that would last for 21 years because it's the same level of payment for 21 years. So, and then of course the math of just adding the two together to give you $2.67, knowing that that $2.67 would be for 3 years while the operational question is in effect, and then when it drops off, then you have only the facilities question continuing for an additional 18 years. So again, this is all based on using your 24 tax bill and the equalized or fair market property value. Okay, calculating your taxes on your own. Okay, this is an example. You can do this with your own tax bill. Up at the top, you're going to see, if you look at your tax bill in the left-hand corner at the top, you're going to see those two boxes at the very top. And you're going to see it's going to talk about assessed value, land improvements, and then the total. And it'll have estimated fair market, land improvement in total. So we're talking about taking the total of the fair market value box. Now we're using 100,000 for easy math. This is not to imply that properties are worth 100,000. This is easy math. This is an example of how to calculate, okay? So the steps involved. Take out your December 24 tax bill, right? Go to your fair market property value. Number 2, place a decimal point before the last 3 digits, because when we're working with the tax rate, it's a per 1,000 tax rate. So we want to make sure we get the right answer in terms of taxes. So that 100,000 becomes 100. You multiply that answer, the step 2 answer, by either question 1, 85 cents, or question 2, $1.82. And then that answer gives you the estimated tax increase, okay, increase per $100,000 of property value above what your December 24 school taxes were. So in this case, that 100 times 85 cents is $85. Or that 100 times the $1.82 is $182,000. So $182. So again, it's that answer, $85 is for every $100,000 of property value, right? So if you have a $200,000 of property value, you'd multiply that twice, okay? This is just an example for easy math so that you can go home. You can do this with your tax bill, and you would know if you got the right answer. Now, the referendum question, the first impact would be on your December of 25 tax bill for both questions, either one. They both start at that time. The final impact for question 1, because it's only out for 3 years, would be the December of 27 tax bill. However, as you know, question 2 would run to the December of 2045 tax bill. Okay? Now, this is just another chart that adds more information, but it's calculated the same way. So it starts off with a fair market value, the operational question, the facilities question. It takes that 100,000 that we just walked through, and it breaks it down per month. So there's that per year of 85 that we just talked about. So if you just divide that by 12, you'll get the per month. And then going to the facilities question, the same thing. The per year is 182 divided by 12. 15, 16. And then you combine them to get the answer on the end. Now, the next box underneath says $250,000, which is the median home value in Pardeeville. Okay? So that's just maybe a more realistic median home value. So if you take that number and you multiply that number times 85-cent tax rate, on an annual basis, per year, it's $212.50. Divide that by 12, and you get the $17.71. And the same is true with the $1.82. For a $250,000, that would be $455 per year, $37.92 a month, and then, of course, the combined numbers. Okay? So, again, this is just a graphic, a chart that shows you the same information that we just walked through on the example page, but also applies it to a $250,000 median. But you can do the same exercise using your own property value on your own tax bill. Okay. All right, next steps.
Thank you, Carol. I'm always amazed at what I learn from Carol, regardless of the setting. She just brings such a wealth of knowledge. I'm sorry, but you do. She brings a wealth of knowledge in explaining the nitty-gritty that can often get overlooked in a big project like this. So thank you, Carol. Next steps. Well, this is the first of 5 community meetings that we're going to be having to lay out the information that will ultimately lead to the question on the ballot on April 1st. The 2 questions, actually, on April 1st. So I encourage you to continue sharing detailed information and accurate information with others who may have questions about the referendum. And I have had the pleasure of visiting almost a dozen groups throughout the community, and I will say that I'm not doing my job correctly if people actually walk the other way when they see me coming. I'll know I've done something meaningful. So anyway, if you have any questions about the referendum, please do see a board member. Please do talk to a member of the administrative team. We'll be out. I hide in plain sight, and so please don't be afraid to talk about the referendum with me or with your friends, your neighbors, or anybody else who wants the Pardeeville Area School District to provide the best education possible for all kids. And so we're going to continue to provide timely messaging regarding this project. And I encourage anyone, the next one will be on March 6th at 11:30 a.m. We'll do that virtually. And if you would like to participate in that, we do have reservations you can make in the district office with Jen Meekum. March 11th will be at Marcellin Town Hall at 6:30. On March 13th, the Wyacina Village Hall at 6:30 p.m. Not the town hall, I almost made that mistake the other night. The Village Hall, and then we'll wrap up in this space on Saturday, March 15th at 9 a.m., not 6 a.m. Please don't set your alarm for 5:30 and think that I'm going to be here at 6 o'clock, because, well, I might be, but it's at 9 a.m. on March 15th in this same space. So if you do have any questions, please do reach out. I encourage you to attend any or all of these sessions in getting the best information available for this upcoming referendum. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Yes, Becky, please. But first I was going to say thank you for listening. But yes, we'll do a Q&A for anybody. We have microphones at the front. We have our project partners who will be sticking around and fielding questions. And once again, I just can't say it enough. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking an interest in our district and what it can do and the vision of what it can do for our kids. So thank you all for being here tonight. And I hope to talk with many of you between now and the election.
Is there a list of all the capital maintenance projects that can be found somewhere?
I can answer that, but We have a list of the capital projects. It's not all inclusive at this point, but we do have the scope pretty well laid out, and I would defer to our friends at Findorf on this one, unless, yeah, if you don't mind, thank you.
I'd just say from my end, seeing what this is right now, the list looks a lot smaller than what I would hope for 23 million. So I think if there was a list of what these capital maintenance would, it would help sell this to the rest of your people here, rather than just put a big box around and say there's a roof.
Yeah, so we've gone through this in some past presentations. Right now, we've looked at primarily explaining it in buckets. So the capital maintenance is $9 million of the 23. So about half of that is roofs. There's another approximately $2 million or so of HVAC, another $2 million of site, and then a couple $100,000 of interiors. That's kind of how we're explaining it right now. Part of what we want to be cognizant with capital maintenance is the needs are ever changing. So we have some targeted HVAC scope, but we also want to be cognizant that we may get to the summer and find out there's a more urgent need and have to pivot slightly within those bounds. So that's kind of the approach we've taken thus far. Yes?
I think it looks to me like you're getting almost all of the roofs redone, except for a little bit at the grade school, and this section here.
That's
How
correct.
much of the project is that?
So that's about $4.5 million is budgeted for that.
Okay. The second question I'd like to ask is, can anybody from the district or the board tell me how this is going to improve the students' scores?
So the state of Wisconsin has a district level report card that measures various student achievement data points. And there is actually some discussion about that would change in the next year or two. And in fact, there was a change in the cut scores this year, which made it very difficult to make a year-over-year comparison. And so when you look at the data right now on the state report cards, I encourage people to be very cautious about how to interpret that. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying that the cut point has changed over the last year, and other districts like ours are trying to make sense of it. We're trying to figure out what kind of data we're actually looking at each grade level and what that indicates in terms of student achievement. And so that may change again next year. So the direct and measurable impact that the operational referendum is going to have is providing, we're looking at a new curriculum in the elementary school. We're looking at ways to unify our staff to differentiate their instruction to meet the needs of all students. By providing staff the resources they need, there's likely going to be a measurable impact on our state report card scores.
Has there been for the last 5 years?
I just came last summer, and I could do some more digging for you if you'd like.
I'm not trying to put you-
No, please, that's fine.
This last round, our scores did improve over prior year,
How much?
3 to 5 points.
So we could ask that of the administrators that are here.
And there's data on the state website as well. The DPI website has our school report cards, and there's a longitudinal look at the trends. But I'd be happy to have that discussion with anyone who would like to look into the last few years.
So in light of what the gentleman said, as far as how is this going to impact it, how is this going to impact it if we don't do it? My thought process on a leaking roof, it's not going to get better. If you have a bad roof, there's no way that gets better over time. You're looking at the potentials for leaks, molds, other things. I only see that negatively impacting the structure. Being able to feed the kids, I know that I've looked at the stoves and stuff like that, but I'm more curious about the immediate negative impacts if we don't do something.
Thank you for asking that question. I've been very fortunate to work not only with an admin team that encompasses the instructional side and the day-to-day operations of the district, but also the support team, including technology and building and grounds. So Mr. Hausner and I have very frequent weekly conversations about the needs of the district. And I didn't mean to share that just briefly at the beginning of the presentation, but there are leaks that pop up and did pop up in the gym this week. And so we're basically doing the best we can with the resources we have right now. being involved with our budget development process. We have in Fund 41, and I won't go into all the different funds. Our general fund is Fund 10. That's where the majority of operational costs come out of. But we also have a Fund 41 for $25,000. And that's not very much money when you look at the big picture. As I stated earlier, we spent $20,000 on a fan shaft, right, Mr. Hausner? Yeah, all right, gotta get the thumbs up. So $20,000 of that $25,000 gone right there. So you're absolutely correct. There are needs that fall beyond our school budget. But right now we're doing a great job, great team. We're communicating with each other, and hopefully we're communicating those needs to the community. And that's why I thank everybody who's here tonight and asking those types of questions.
I can maybe just add on a little bit. You know, when we are making recommendations, when I talked about some of those buckets, we're really focusing on items that are critical for keeping the schools open. In terms of roofs, you know, your best course of action is to maintain them when they reach the end of their life. If you don't replace them, you're going to be paying to fix the leaks, but you're still going to have that long-term cost of replacing the roof. So it's more expensive not to keep up with the maintenance of these items. Similarly with the HVAC system, at a certain point if the HVAC system isn't maintained and the heat goes off and it's the middle of winter, kids cannot come to school. So there's a reason that those items are focused on versus the interiors, which everybody likes nice carpet, right? But that's not critical to having kids in the building. So there's much less dollars focused on the interiors versus things like the site, HVAC, and roofs that are more critical to having students in the buildings.
Understand that I'm not against maintenance. That's necessary. It's important. We have to do it. But if it's only $4 million for the roofs, you got $19,500,000 going somewhere. And I think that needs to be maybe a little better explained. Roofs have to be fixed. Stoves are minor. What are they? A couple $1,000? So I understand that, and I'll be the first to support it. But we also have a guy in the community who's willing to work with the board and work with the builders. And that's all this man has done all his life. And I hope the board revisits that and will take advantage of that. He'll charge nothing.
Thank you.
Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on it's not just stoves that are an issue with the cafeteria kitchen. If you could just give a few more points here.
Yeah, so in terms of the $23 million, and I'm going to use rough numbers, I'm not sure we have the exact slide up here today, but that breaks down largely into three buckets. We have the capital maintenance, which is $9 million. Then we have the renovations and additions at the high school and middle school, which includes the kitchen and the replacement of Balliet, which is an addition. And then we have another couple $1 million being spent at the elementary school for a small addition there, as well as some interior remodeling. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but the order of magnitude being spent here outside of the capital maintenance is a couple $1 million. And then if we were to go back to the high school, again, I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but we're in the $10 million range of work being done here between the cafeteria and the middle school addition that replaces Balliet. So that's kind of the explanation. We can certainly get some more detail. I know that's been discussed recently in board meetings with a much more detailed breakdown of costs that helped inform the decision for the current referendum question.
Anyone else? Please.
Sarah, did you want to?
What?
Oh, I thought you were leaning forward to ask. Okay.
So
The way I look at this, we're working with a building that is over 100 years old. And another building is over 50 years old. Now, can you imagine not doing anything if this was your house? And waiting 50 years to put a new roof on your house? This is needed on these buildings. Needed very, very much.
Thank you, Barry. Yeah, these are needs and not wants. Otherwise, we wouldn't be coming to the community for their support. Thank you.
Anything else?
I'll just add a little bit here too, that you look at, there's a middle school classroom, that addition alone, taking the Balliet down and adding that's cost there. But that's something that is a learning opportunity for those students to have a classroom that's more functional. They're not going between buildings, they're actually being housed in the same building. There's some safety concerns there. That's the way things are nowadays. We have to be cognizant of how our students are going between their educational opportunities. I look at a cafeteria and a kitchen. We're feeding kids, middle school kids, out of a closet. This way it gives us an opportunity to have an updated area for feeding our students, for having a kitchen that is functional. It's not just stoves, and I know you wouldn't realize that because you haven't sat in on the meetings that we have, but it's an area where the dishwasher is. That's a safety hazard for our employees because the ventilation isn't adequate. We look at serving areas that need upgrading because they haven't been functioning. We're using heat lamps. How we can design that area so it can be utilized more functionally and safely for our students, I think, is a big component of that. I also look at that as an area that would be utilized by the community. That could give us more opportunity if you have your end of season banquets and functions that celebrate our students' accomplishments. When you look at the elementary, having that space for the learning center is very important. We talked about air conditioning within the buildings. There again is another concern that we have just for the function of our students' learning environment. I know there's a lot of questions here, but I think if we can make these improvements, this is why our students do well and we have students that want to come here. We have a community that has been very supportive over the years in looking at the educational opportunities. As a board, we have looked at this and we're not looking at any frills. We're just looking at things that need to get done. When we first started this process, it was alluded to at the beginning, $40 million. As a board, we knew $40 million was going to be really hard to pass. How can we make a priority and really look at what can we do with the dollars that we think the community will support us on? And that's where we've come up with these numbers. We have a very good track record of staff that stay here. We have talent that's in our classrooms every day that really make the investment to be here. If you want to know more about test scores, I hate to quote numbers that I don't have exactly in front of us, but we do have staff administrators that are here that can give you that information that's accurate.
First, thank you for everyone for coming out tonight for the information session. Appreciate the support and just being part of the conversation. I want to speak to the cafeteria, the kitchen, and the servery area, and in direct correlation with test scores. It is an antiquated and out-of-date area. The steam trays in the countertop haven't worked for years. I would say generations of students. The way that food is prepared, including delivered, refrigeration, we've had to replace a lot of freezers and cooling items that keep the food sanitary and available to be served to the students and the staff. Well-fed staff, well-fed community, and well-fed students does vastly improve our test scores and the engagement of the students and community. And I know that that's a significant portion of that remaining $19.5 million, but that loading dock is an out of code and out of compliance area. If you notice, that's where the dumpsters are located as well on that side of the building. And we've done the best that we can, but there is something that does need to be done with that. We've been able to serve out of the multi-purpose room, I'd say personally, begrudgingly, to be honest with you. The cafeteria and the kitchen and the servery is an incredibly critical part of this, as well as every other part of it. And so I think that this is something that does need to be seriously taken a look at. and willing to support it if you can. So thank you.
This may sound horrible, but it's true. I came here to teach in 1971. We're sitting in a beautiful building now. But when I came, some of the problems that were in the elementary building and part of the high school, guess what? They're still here from 1971.
I just want to say Tammy and Sam do such an awesome job in the kitchen every single day. But, and I think a lot of you know this, our middle school kids eat in the multi-purpose room. The food is all cooked in the high school kitchen. It's carted down to the middle school. We have lunch over about an hour period of time. So there are times when there's not enough food brought down from through no fault of Tammy or Sam, down to the middle school for the kids to eat. And so then the ladies are running back and forth to try to get more food to feed our kids. It's just kept under warmers while it's down there too. So, by the time the last group eats, it's maybe not that hot. The space is very limited. We have, a couple bigger classes. Our biggest class right now is 80. And those kids are jam-packed in that lunch space. We alternate it with a recess time, so we're just rotating the kids in there very, very quickly. They don't get a lot of time to eat. I would love to give them more time, but with such a small space, and to try to keep the food warm, it really makes lunch not super great for our kids. We haven't been eating in the cafeteria for years. I've been here since 2003. Probably the first 2 to 4 years that I worked here, middle school ate in the cafeteria. Since probably 2005, we've been eating either in our middle school gym or in this middle school multi-purpose room. So, for my kids, for middle school kids, it would be really, really wonderful if we could feed them in an actual cafeteria with some space, give them a little more time to eat, and not have them be so crowded and rushed all the time. And the other thing I just wanted to mention was the Balliet. I think most of you here know that kids walk outside from the Balliet every single day to come to the main building for lunch and for Explore classes and music classes. So the doors are all locked. They use fobs to come in and out, or their teachers lead them. But again, that's the safety issue that we're talking about, kids walking outside back and forth between the buildings basically all day long. About a month ago, the sewer backed up in the Balliet building, and we had to move the kids over to the main building, which we did, no problem. But it seems like every few days, something's going wrong. There's a leak in the gym ceiling. Something, we're putting duct tape on things as best we can, but it's getting to the point where something really needs to be done to fix the roofs and take care of the Balliet and the middle school kitchen. That's all I can speak for, because that's all I know, but I'll pass it back to Ben wherever he's at here.
You know a lot more than that, just for the record.
Amber, you said something about the kids would have more time to eat, the middle school kids. How would the kids have more time when they have to go that much further to get there when they don't have time now?
Yeah, so David and I would have to work out the logistics of that, but in my mind, if we have more space, then we can let the kids who want to take a little more time to eat sit in the cafeteria a little bit longer. Some of the boys, usually not the girls, I don't want to quantify or whatever, but some of the boys eat really fast and then they want to go out and play right away. But a lot of our girls eat slow and chat, right? But we have to move them all along so we can get the next group in and feed them. If we have more space, we can let everybody who wants to take a little more time to eat their food, and those who want to go out for recess can head out for recess. We can just be a little more flexible in moving the kids throughout the cafeteria instead of, we only have 80 spaces, only 80 people can eat. Got to move you guys all out so the next group can come in.
What about, what made you guys, I mean, maybe this isn't time and place, what made you guys get rid of the, you know, doing anything with the middle school and the secure entrance and stuff? That entryway over there is, you know, trying to drop kids off in the morning, there's no room over there, and I'm just wondering if that's something that could potentially get added on if there was money left, or what made that be one of the deciding factors to lead the design, I guess?
Appreciate the question. I think a key thing that we as a design team have worked with the Findorf team and all the district partners as well is maintaining future options. So what you see proposed within this current facilities referendum would not hinder, should not hinder the district from pursuing future long-term projects that were identified. Nothing proposed within the current referendum would inhibit a future middle school gym expansion if that were desired at some point in the future. Nothing would inhibit relocating the middle school office to the southeast corner of the existing building at some point in the future if that were desired. An additional classroom space could be added approximately where the single classroom that we're talking about adding to the elementary building if that were desired in the future. So we've worked hard to identify the most appropriate first phase that aligned best with key goals, critical goals, as well as the funding support that was identified within the community survey. So I think it is a key safety and security item. It's a key functional item. For mental health and middle school students, middle school guardians, parents, family members, but was not a higher priority than other items that were included within the current project as we discussed them.
I hope everybody realizes this is really a $35 million project. Right?
The capital project's up to $23.5 million.
Right. And you take 3.7 million times 21 years, and that's $35 million.
Oh, the amortization. Carol, would you?
Maybe further ahead.
Yeah.
This might shock some of you to look at a new school at 40 million. And I know you're not going to cover everything maybe that you want to do in the high school, and or vice versa, whatever way you go. But the one gentleman here said we got a 100-year-old building and a 50-year-old building.
Can he have a
And in
microphone?
20 years, we're going to have a 120-year-old building and a 70-year-old building.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, would compound, yeah. So it would still be a much higher amount because you would have that carried forward. The amortization would be up to, yeah, so it compounded for years. So the amount isn't so much in question as the scope of our current project. Is that the question?
I was talking real cost. So it's 23 and a half, but over time, the interest included in the capital payment.
It'll be
35-ish million.
Yes, if correct. When you add the interest on the borrowing at 4.5% over 21 years, that's the difference of 23.5 plus the interest that gets you up to, if it's 35 or whatever. I mean, I have my schedules here. What is it? 35.9 is the total principal and interest over 21 years at 4.5. If we are lucky enough to do the borrowing at less than 4.5, we come in less than that. If we have a project that costs $30 million, we have to go out and borrow $30 million. Right? Think of it the same way as if you were buying a car, right? It works the same way. It's a loan. You start off with the purchase price. The interest is added to it. And if you pay it off sooner, you pay less interest. You can do that with this borrowing as well. So it works the very same way as a car loan, a house mortgage, anything.
Could you maybe speak a little bit to the limit or the ceiling that we are able to borrow as a district our size, right? We don't have a limitless opportunity to borrow.
Okay, in terms of borrowing limits, okay, that's driven by state statute as well, and this applies to all school districts in the state. The state says that a district can only borrow up to 10% of its equalized or fair market value. So $960 million, take 10% of that, and that's the amount that the district can legally borrow or have outstanding at any one point in time. As you pay it off, you get it back. As your valuation grows, you get more authority. So those are the restrictions under the statutes.
One thing we have to remember, yes, I said we have a building over 50 years old and 100, but guess what? You take care of those buildings, 50 and 100, and they last. And you can see that in buildings around our state. You take care of them.
It's like your home.
Aaron, do you have any off-the-cuff numbers for like per square foot for a new school in today's, like, just to help the gentleman out who thinks one school at 40 million would I don't know what you're going to get a school for $40 million.
Yeah, for a new elementary school, it's going to depend on the size of the school, but I'll say $40 to $50 million probably isn't an unreasonable range. You have to remember, though, if you're comparing that, that's not including the interest on that, right? You'd have to have a bond sale for that, and so that would be, you know, equivalent to what you'd purchase bonds for, the $23 million we're talking about today.
And that's one school. That's not the rest of the repairs and anything else.
Correct. That wouldn't address anything else within the district, unlike the $9 million of capital maintenance, which addresses needs across all the buildings.
If you're getting to a little bit of a point of referendum fatigue, please trust that I've been there myself sometimes, just looking at the numbers and trying to keep things in perspective. There's a lot of good that will come from this project, an immeasurable amount of good that will come from this project, and having faith in the process is the biggest part of this. And so I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight and being a part of the process, because this is where the rubber meets the road. And I want people in the community, the taxpayers who are invested in this district's success, to remember that any one of us are here for the students. We are really ultimately here for the students and want to see them succeed, because at some point they're going to leave our school and they're going to enter the world, and their level of readiness starts right here. And so the board, the administration, the staff, everyone who's involved with this project and this referendum, kudos and applause, because it takes truly a village to make something like this happen. So to our project partners, to everyone who attended tonight, thank you for being a part of the process, and I encourage you to continue engaging with us, knowing that regardless of the outcome, we are here for your kids. So if there are no further questions, I would like to wrap up and thank you all very much. Thank you.